Welcome to the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio. Keenan Lake is the author of the book My Daddy Taught Me That, published by Welcome, a social worker and activist. You can like this show's fan page at www.facebook.com/The Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio. Feel free to post any comments, questions, or requests for his book on the fan page. Now let's go into the studio with your host, Mr. Keenan Lake, and co-host, Marcus Select.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Keenan Lake Show right here on SIBN Radio. We appreciate you guys stopping by. And Mr. Keenan Lake, how are you doing today?
Coach, I am doing wonderful today. How are you and yourself?
Doing good, man. I understand that we have a very interesting show on today, talking about the Willie Lynch letters from past to present.
That is correct, Coach. I mean, over our last couple of shows, we've had some really good conversation, and just in short, you have read a few inserts from the Willie Lynch letter, which caused me to kind of go back and take a second look. And, Coach, I had no idea. I read the Willie Lynch letter, or at least a part of it, probably like 10, 12 years ago, and I thought it was something short and sweet. But as I dove into this time it's a long letter, and it's different parts of it. So, I had no idea it was this big and how much content it had in it. But, when I was reading it, it just really intrigued me, and then it was some information that I felt that would be really, really beneficial for our audience.
All righty. Well, let's get to it, sir, because those of you that are listening to the sound of our voices, that we're going to lead your comments. We're going to need you to follow on Twitter and share what you think. So let's talk about what you got to talk about today, Mr. Lake. Okay,
Coach. So, for those who don't know, the Willie Lynch letter. Willie Lynch is a British slave owner from the West Indies, and in 1712 he came to speak to those who lived in Virginia, and he gave a speech primarily about how to control slaves, how to make a slave, and the main point that he was talking about in his speech and in his letters were that slaves are property, okay, and that he talked about how he noticed that in England, slaves were they kill slaves by putting them on the crosses and stuff like that. And then he said he noticed here in the United States, that we kill slaves by hanging and stuff like that. So the whole point that he had was, when you kill slaves, you hurt your business. That's you're hurting your business, and that's just a waste of money. So there's no need to kill slaves when you can control them and have them do anything and everything that you want them to do. Mm-hmm. So, with that, Coach, I wanted to take the first part of this letter, and there's a section that says, "Let's make a slave." Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this. It says, "Let's make a slave," and it says, "What do we need?" It says, first of all, we need a black male and a black female, and then we need their baby. Okay, a baby boy. It specifically says a baby boy. It says, secondly, we will use the same basic principles to break or control a slave as we use as breaking or controlling a horse. So it says, what do we do with the horses? And this is what it says. It says, what we do with horses is that we break them from one life to another. This is to reduce them from their natural state in nature, whereas nature provides them with the natural capability to take care of their offspring. We break that string of independence from them, and thereby create a dependency status, so that we may be able to get them from the useful production of our businesses and pleasure. So I found that to be very interesting, Coach. It talks about how first of all, it talked about you use that same philosophy as breaking a horse, but mm-hmm. then it specifically talks about making breaking them to where they can't feel independent anymore, but have dependency from the owner. You want to weigh in on that, Coach?
Well, I mean, it is what it says, and as you have said so eloquently before, while, it sounds simple as he's presenting it, we see the complications that it seems to continue to today. I mean, this is the disappointing factor. When you read this letter, Keenan, and those of you that have not read it, just type in Willie, WILLIE, Lynch, and then if you get the PDF version, you don't have to worry about all the other stuff on the screen, and you can just print it out. But it's just, just as it is bold of those in political parties in this country today who further the same agenda of dependency or further the same agenda of the opposite, the extreme, which is to say you don't deserve, you are not entitled to any help, but we are for the sake of our profitability margins, but you yourself and your life you're on your own. So the letter is very poignant. It's very direct. That's the shocking part about this right here. He's giving you the keys to warfare of how war has been waged on African-American men in particular, but more so African-American families. And to recap what you said, he says it was the interest and business of slaveholders to study human nature. You see, that's what's wrong with black folk. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. We don't study human nature. Before you have a reaction to something, before you go out and spend your money, before you go off and cuss somebody out, you got to do what these folks did for the business of your life and study folks. And he says here, the slave in nature in particular, with a view to practical results. I and many of them attain astonishing proficiency in this direction. It's amazing what you can learn if we stop and study. It would be amazing. It kind of points to the show that we had last time. Who's controlling what you're buying? Who's controlling what you're seeing? And it would be amazing if a whole generation would stop and study. But he goes on to say they had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men. And by every regard they had for their own safety and prosperity, they need to know the material on which they were to work, conscious of the injustice and so forth and so on. But this letter is very, very poignant. It's almost like they're telling you what they're going to do, which is still being done.
Being done, Coach. So check this out, Coach. I'm gonna continue with this, and I'm gonna talk now. That was it said, let's make a slave, and I'm gonna bring all this together as we continue with the show. So the first part talked about being able to take away control and breaking the mentality of the so-called slave, which was back then, of course, the African Americans, and by primarily taking away the independence and the right to raise your children. Now that's what it said. We're going to take away the right to raise the children and their independence, causing them to be dependent upon us. So then this is the next part that I want to read, comes from the section of the marriage, okay? And it says, we breed two males with two females, and of course it has some other choice words, but two males with two females. And then it says, then we take away the males. So we take away the males, keeping the males moving and working. It says, then the two females, if they have a male child or a female child, being without influence of the male image, frozen with the independent psychology, will raise their offspring into reverse positions. It says, the one female offspring will teach her child to be like herself, independent and negotiable. We negotiate with her through her by her negotiates her will. So basically, then it says the one with the male child offspring was going to be frozen, of course, subconscious fear. And so basically what they said is this mother will teach the child to be frozen subconscious fear for his life. She'll have fear for the child's life and will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically, in other words, the body over mind. So basically, what they're saying is this: the woman, when they get married and they marry the slaves or the back then, what they're basically saying is this, Coach: they so-called breed the male and the female. They breed the male and the female. They take the male role model away. They take the male out of the picture. He's working, moving away from the mother and the child. If the mother has a female child, the female child will be raised just like the mother. So that means that they'll be independent as far as independent from a male. Their psychology will be different, and they'll teach the female child just like they are. As opposed for the male, without the role models of any males around, the male child, and I'm gonna read this again. The male child will be taught to be, and this is why they say the mother will teach the male child this because she's a fear for the child's life. Okay, so she will raise him to be mentally dependent and weak, but physically strong. Now, Coach, let me ask you this. Does that not sound like how our young men are today?
Yes, and what
mentally
we don't want to acknowledge it.
And weak.
Yes,
but physically strong.
Yes, strong athletically, right? Strong physically.
Yep.
Go ahead. I got the paragraph here in the studio because she has been.
Go ahead, Coach.
It says, because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offsprings to be psychologically independent. And what have you got? Well, you got the Negro. We're gonna change the word out. We got the Negro woman out front, and the Negro man behind and scared.
Right.
Don't that sound like 2013?
Coach, I mean, seriously, so check this out. I'm going to read this last piece, okay, Coach? Now, this is the breaking process. This is called, this part of the letter says, the breaking process of the African-American woman, okay? So it says, like you said earlier, they did a lot of tests. They ran some tests and series on the African-American woman to see if she will submit, to she'll submit to their desires, and to see if she'll do this willingly. But it says she does not do this willingly, not to kill her, just to, because you don't want to lose your profit. But it says, let me find this part, Coach, because it was a specific part in this that I wanted to read.
But while you're finding that part, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to weigh in on the the KL Show on Twitter, and also on Facebook, the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio, and also on Keenan Lake's personal page. We want you to weigh in as we share. We may be sharing parts of this letter throughout all of our shows for a bit, because the truth needs to be released. The truth of what the slave owners intended, which has continued on in principle, and also the truth of our response as a people, not only African Americans, but also those other minority groups who have been subject to slave principle mentality and conditions. You got it, Keenan?
I got it, Coach. Okay, so it says, when the female, and of course it doesn't say female, but when the female woman is completely in submission, she will train her offspring in the early years to submit to labor when they become of age, understanding this is the best thing. Therefore, Therefore, we shall go into deeper in this area, matter of subject and concerning that we have produced here in this breaking process of the female woman. Okay? So basically, and then it says, we have reversed the relationship in her natural, uncivilized state. So basically, Coach, let me just say this, okay? When reading this, it talked about, and the reason I read the specific points that I did, it talked about making a slave, okay? And then it talked about taking away more so not your independence and your right to raise children. And we know that's one of the biggest things in the African American community, is being able to raise our children, for years and centuries and centuries. That's us. We're family oriented people, but what we're starting to see now, I actually saw T.D. Jakes has a new show, and it was on this morning, and they were talking about the lack of male role models in fatherless homes and stuff like that. So what we're starting to see, folks listening to the airwaves of the Keenan Lake Show, what we're starting to see, and this is nothing new, this has been going on for quite a while now, for several years now, but it's becoming more evident. And in all of my studies and all of my work, what we're starting to see is when you do not have that core, which I talk about every show, the core of the home, which is not just the male, but the female, the male, the family core, that family core, then you're starting to have a lot of broken homes, a lot of problems, a lot of this, a lot of that. And a lot of this and a lot of that more likely is not negative. But what you see in this letter, and the reason this letter really struck me is because it talked about taking our independence. So taking away our independence in 2013, and it's like this. We're dependent now on public assistance. So we can't live off of public assistance. We can't live off of someone helping us or someone giving us a handout. Then we won't make it. That also means that we have no men in our homes. You know, the men are not there for whatever reason. The men decide to leave on their own. The woman doesn't want the man there because, Coach, I've heard this if you haven't. I heard that a lot of women say that they're too independent. And Coach, we're going to do a show in a couple of weeks about, the African-American marriages and stuff like that, how that's failing in today's society as well. But whatever reason, the African-American male is not in the home, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Coach, what makes me look even deeper, and then we finally see that how when you have single mothers, which seems like this was a plan, according to this letter, we want these women to raise these men to be single, primarily when you talk about the women raising the men, because one thing that does is this. It takes away the essence of a man, okay, a man being a man, because now he's fearful. Mm-hmm. Now he's mentally not thinking for himself or capable of thinking for himself, and the only attribute left of that man is his physical, the physical strength of a man, and that's it. But there's no mental strength anymore. There's no mental development anymore, and it's kind of like the mental capacity of the male has been stunted. So, Coach, when you read this, it seems almost like this is what's happening today. But when you see a letter like this, Coach, how do we overcome this, and how do we get past this?
Well, the first thing that the letter reminds me of is that this is a mastermind plan. And I often talk about in my shows that mastermind plans are people of influence, affluence, people who have power, wealth, and beyond political power and beyond educational power, who can set policy. Not talking about setting just policy in law, but setting policy in culture. There's a difference. Policy and law can be changed, but once the minds have been bought, it's hard to get them back. I need some help right there. So this letter reminds me of a mastermind plan. So not only was he speaking to a group of people, but obviously moreover, this is well thought. This is thought through. This is thought through with study. This is thought through with research. And what is amazing to me is arguably those who will stand up and buck that they have this reason and that reason for why their situation is like it is, but the fact still remains that we seem to be like puppets on a string. And I don't care how many successful African-American males we do raise up, which we are raising up some, Latino males being raised up, I would say Asians, but they don't qualify in this category. Not in this category, they don't. No matter how many we raise up, we still have hovering over us this letter. And the antidotes of how we have shown great tendencies to be slaves in the 21st century. We're going to go to commercial break, Keenan. We're going to come back. It's getting hot in the kitchen. This is the Coach.
All right, Coach.
We trust that you are enjoying the show. Stay right there. We'll be right back after these messages.
Responsible, accountable. Who taught you that? My daddy taught me that. That's right, the new book all the way from Asheville, North Carolina, representing the legacy of Benny Lake is Keenan Lake, the author of My Daddy Taught Me That, the book and the program for young men in Asheville, North Carolina and throughout the region. Tune in to the program, the project, and the book at mydaddytaughtmethat.com. For more information, email lake@mydaddytaughtmethat.com or call 828-582-2261. That's 828-582-2261. mydaddytaughtmethat.com.
Ustedes están escuchando SIBN, transmitido por Salet USA TV. Síguenos en Twitter @Salet USA TV o visítenos en www.41596radio.com.
Well, we're back here, SIBN Radio, the Keenan Lake Show. Keenan, we're talking about the making of a slave, the Willie Lynch letters, and are we living our present from the past? This letter seems to be somewhat prophetic.
Coach, before we continue, because let me just say this, folks. To all my listeners out there, I want you to understand that I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to promote or advocate for racial, separate racial issues or cause any type of racial controversy out there or anything like that, because I think that, we need to be together in this whole struggle, this whole fight. The same problems that are weighing on us as American folks affect both white, black, green, Latino, everything. It is more prevalent in the African American home, but these are problems that absent fathers are prevalent in all races. Mm-hmm. But the point that I'm trying to make with today's show is this: that reading this letter, okay, and seeing what some of these things have said, it's the things that I've said before in the show, that there have been certain obstacles, certain things that have been put in place that can contribute to where we are today. Mm-hmm. And what I would love to do and what I want to do is create change. Mm-hmm. And by creating change, making you aware that, okay, this was something that was written in the 1700s. You understand how far along that is? From 1700s, this letter came out. But we're still reaping the detriment to this letter today. And so by making you aware that there's a letter out there that someone that wrote that had a way of control and using these controlling methods, because also something that Coach said way back on a few shows ago, this letter also states that if this method is followed, that it would control the slaves for the next 300 to 400 years to come.
And it's 300 years. Wasn't it 300 years that it was written 300 years ago?
Exactly. So the point is, it's like 300 to 400 years to come that this letter, if this was followed, and these rules were followed then, that they would control slaves to this very day. So the way that I like to combat against stuff like this is making sure that you're informed, you're aware, and then give some suggestions on my part on how we can overcome this. You understand what I'm saying, Coach? Mm-hmm. I know you do, but
no, I mean, but but speaking of overcome, let me just put it out there like this right here. One of the things that we never talk about, we won't do it in this show, but we need to talk about it one day, is that one of the things that was introduced without balance, without principle in slavery was sex exploitation. And as a result, I believe, and as I say, we won't go into the stats and all of that, but as a result, our people, African Americans, just speaking to them right now, not to say that Western culture has not adopted this as well, but our culture have put on a pedestal the sexual relationship so high above everything else, values, principles, that we have, without intending to in many cases, exploited ourselves and placed ourselves in conditions and experiences and situations unbeknownst that brings pressure to the fact that we didn't mean or intend to contribute to the attributes of continuing making of a slave. I need some help. And so at some point, no matter what we discuss, the elephant in the room is that I love to have sex. For whatever reason, if I'm abused, if I'm neglected, If I was raped and never processed it with a counselor or no one ever believed me, the elephant in the room for African Americans is this sexual exploitation that took place during slavery is yet, and we are not being paid to do it. As you said in your show, the show before last, now we can get contracts and we can get loot, as they used to say in the street, and get paid to lead masses of young African American families or individuals into the same principles that you and I are talking about today, which is not mentioned directly in this letter, but if you have control of somebody, you have control of their body. I need some help right there.
Exactly. And what you're talking about, Coach, I'm thinking when you're saying that about the grant fundings and stuff like that. So, if I'm not mistaken, is that what you're saying, Coach?
On what part now?
When you said about getting money to lead, you're talking about getting...
Oh, no, I was talking about entertainment. I was talking about what you were talking about the show before last, that we're paid to kill our own folks. I need some help right there.
Exactly. You're absolutely right, Coach. And see, the thing about that is this, too, Coach, to add to what you're saying and to elaborate more on this, and being conscious of what this letter states is this, okay? What we know this now, and we've talked about this in the last few shows, too, is how primarily our males are overly aggressive, and we've been trained to act and not to react and not think. So we act, we react, but we don't think. So if something happens, and this is and my audience may relate to this. An African American trait is this: we're talkers. So and it's a defense mechanism. If someone says something out of the way and you're talking junk, that's how we do, Coach. We talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and how bad it's going to be, but technically we're not going to do nothing. That's just our defense mechanism. But talkers will let you know, but, not unless it really came down to it, and then we might throw up some hands, But anyway.
Okay.
That's just how, that's how well we talk, but the way our youth are being raised now, not just males, it's females as well. Mm-hmm. But our males they're so overly aggressive, Coach.
Yeah.
And I said this in the show before, they're overly aggressive because it's a false sense
of security.
It's a false sense of security. And it's like they don't, but see, that goes back to that letter. They're mentally dependent on other things such as rap music, such as Jordan, such as video games, such as materialistic stuff. So it's like we're not thinking for ourselves, or able to say, you know what, I can take this route, or I can do that, or I can do this and get another outcome, and think. And so, Coach, these are the things that we need to do. These are the things that we can do. We can start teaching our youth better. First of all, we can start teaching our youth better by doing better. What they see us do, we know. We said this in 100 shows. What they see us do as adults, as parents, as care providers, they're going to do. So if we can start, first of all, giving them that example to be better, that's going to make a big difference.
Well,
then secondly, Coach, go ahead, Coach.
But the thing about it is this, they're unbeknownst to the media and unbeknownst to a lot of folk, the African American race is making much more progress than it'll ever be given. Let's just put that out there.
That's true.
The African American race is making headway in education, economics, women's rights, civil rights, political stamina, political power. But here's the problem. If you never show the house, who's going to buy it? And every real estate's office is awards on the wall for those who've sold the most homes. But they can't sell the home unless the potential buyer sees the home. And so another question, because we don't want people to feel so indicted that there's without hope. Another way to look at it is, yes, do what you can to do better. But keep in mind, no one is going to rush to shine the light on your good deeds. We're in a war here. And so what you have to do when your child does well, here's an example, Keenan, before you go on to point two. If your child does well, you got to make a big deal out of it. I'm not saying reward a child with candied apples and popcorn. I'm saying you got to make a big deal out of the good that our kids do. You got to make a big deal out of the fights they didn't get into. You got to make a big deal about them being 18 and didn't have a baby before they were 18. You got to make a big deal about your husband being with you for 3 years. I need some help. You got to make a big deal about the fact that you do have a great job, but you stop and take time and will stop in a hot minute to go to a PTA meeting. And you want to praise yourself for stepping out of the pattern of culture. And as Keenan says, adopting to a conditioning that you set. Point number 2, Keenan, what would you say point number 2 is?
That's actually, Coach, I cannot thank you enough for making that point. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And, you know, not only sharing those successes, but elaborating on them. Like you said, make it known. Because those are the things, that's how we're going to win this thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing, Coach, is this. And I know we're about out of time, so I don't want to take a lot of time. But anyway, the last thing that I'm going to say on the subject is this, folks. As parents, as families, you know, the thing that when I saw this T.D. Jakes show this morning, I briefly saw a little bit of that. One of the things that grabs my attention is something that I've been saying to a lot of folks. This is not something that Keenan Lake and my daddy taught me that can change, you know, just by going out here and doing something. This is not anything that Marcus Select, a.k.a. the coach, can change. This is nothing that you as an individual can change. This is a take a village type of approach. And if we as a whole make these subtle changes, you know, for example, and these are quick things, Coach. You see a kid, and I know we have the mindset now. It's like, well, I don't know that kid, and I don't want to get cussed out by that kid. But as an adult, you have a right. You see a kid doing something wrong. Hey, look, young man, young lady, I need you to come in for a second. I don't appreciate what you did. You know, that's not right. You don't have to do that. Now, there are certain ways of doing that without getting in confrontation, and, you know, without causing a ruckus and stuff like that. But being able to hold these young folks accountable, being able to hold ourselves accountable because people are watching. But then ultimately, men, we have to be men. I say this every show. We have to start getting back to taking care of our families, taking care of our children, and stop having the whole brunt of the burden on our women, on our females. We got to start taking better control and taking our shit back and being able to right these wrongs so we can make these subtle changes and then ultimately have some great big successes that the entire world will see and know.
Listen, a lot of us that are listening to this show, we have been taught better. And I'm not talking to just anybody, but there's a certain segment of listeners, you've been taught better. Your grandmother, your grandfather, as in Keenan's situation, in my situation, perhaps a father or stepfather, or even a good, strong mother. Ain't nothing like a good, strong mother. I need some help right there. Ain't nothing like some of the mothers from back in the day. When they put their foot down, their foot was down, and you had to get with the program. But listen, some of us know better. Here's the problem with the black community. When we know better, we should do better. And when we do better, we have to blow a bugle about the good that we have done. And a lot of people that know better, Keenan, they not doing better. They know they should have spiritual component to their lives and at least find a church where they can center themselves spiritually. Whether they believe in a resurrection or whether they believe in, you know, Saint Mary or those are side issues. But they know that they should have a spiritual component. A lot of people know that they should have protection. Let's count out about 5 of them. They know they should have protection when they have sex. What is this thing that now we're so bold and what's that word that when young guys think they can never be destroyed? Indestructible. That we don't teach our young people and we don't show them that they have to, if you're going to be sexually active, you got to have a condom or not, I don't even say birth control. Guys got to have a condom. What is this thing without a condom? Let's go ahead and talk about practical points. We know better than that, Keenan. That we know better. Right. We know better that when a child come home from school and is sitting there playing a video game, that chances are that homework is not done, and if it is done, it ain't all done. And all we have to do now is go online or stop up to the PTA or parent-child meetings and find out how to child. But you know what, Keenan? We know, but we don't do. And when we do, we don't make a big noise about it. These are practical steps.
Real quick, Coach. Not to cut you off real quick, but let me just say this. I know we're out of time.
No, we're gonna go for the full strength and power of the.
Okay, Coach. Coach, I know this is one of the things that when I'm in meetings, Coach, I don't have a bunch of meetings. I'm on a bunch of different boards, and you know this board, that board, related to my works. But when I'm in most of these meetings, a lot of times we're talking about the underserved, the minority, the underprivileged, stuff like that. And the biggest things out of all 10 boards that I'm on, out of all 10 meetings that I go to, the one thing that stays true is this: if they don't know, how can they do? Mm-hmm. And it goes back to this too. You know, the underprivileged, the underserved, the minority, mm-hmm. they don't know, so how can they change? But the thing is what you just said, Coach. Mm-hmm. If you don't know, there's ways to get educated and informed. Mm-hmm. But in some cases, and actually a lot of cases, we do know. And mm-hmm. so, like Coach was just saying, if you know, then why would you not act? Why would you not try? Mm-hmm. And that goes back to a pet peeve of mine, Coach. You know, I talk a lot about, you know, certain topics and stuff like that. But actually, this was in my book, and I think I said this before. Once again, I want to make this very clear. If you're receiving any type of financial assistance and you need help, I commend you, and I actually not commend you, but I encourage you to continue to find and actually even seek mm-hmm. additional help to get on your feet. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with public assistance. I want to make that clear. Mm-hmm. If you truly need it, mm-hmm. and you truly need it to help you get by and take care of your family. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that really bothers me, Coach, is for those who don't truly need it, or those who kind of manipulate and cheat the system.
Of course.
If you're an able-bodied person and you're able to get out here and work, mm-hmm. but you rather sit home and watch Jerry Springer and Maury all day and just, you know. Now, with that being said, Coach, let me just say this, and I don't want to get off on a tangent and take away from our topic today. The system is set up to kind of as a double-edged sword, because we have a lot of single mothers out there and a lot of single parents in general mm-hmm. who work. But they make $15 above the cutoff, you know, the financial aid or the cutoff. So it's like, well, I can go out here and work myself to the bone, and I won't make it because I make $15 over. So the system is messed up. You know, mm-hmm. it's kind of one of those things. You know, damn if you do, damn if you don't.
Double-edged sword.
But what I'm trying to say is this: if you're able to get out here and make a difference, make a change in your life, mm-hmm. then you need to do that, and then stop trying to get over and because you know who you are, and you know what that's about. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is this: if you continue to do the same thing day after day after day, you will never change your life, mm-hmm. and you will never reach your goals if mm-hmm. you have any in life. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Coach.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. These hard fought and heartedly direct practical steps are very important. So let's go over them again. There is, as you said, and I will give that sentiment as well, that there's a lot of people that just don't know what to do. Now, they don't know for a plethora of reasons. One, because they wasn't paying attention when the class was in session. I need some help. They was absent in mind, absent in body. Or perhaps they had no governorship. They have no governorship. Policies were in place, rules were in place, but there was hostile engagement because there was no governance at home. All right. But I want to go back to the practical steps as it relates to a man at home, because this is a big issue, and this is the pet peeve of the show here. We always talk about the men being absent. So those women that are listening out there, we want you to hit us back as to how are you involving men in general in the lives of your children, because you're fighting an uphill battle because schools are 70% ran by women. I need some help. And then you go to church, and though you may have a male pastor, church statistics show us that church is 70% women. Now we know that our homes are 70% women ran in the African American community, to be precise. So I want to know for the women that are listening, then if how are you going to involve? I'm not talking about a potential husband or boyfriend. I'm just talking about good male leadership. It don't even have to be black male leadership, just good male leadership exposure to your kids. How are you going to do it when you have 70-30 everywhere you turn? So that's a very valid point, Coach. That's a practical aspect. Before we go to commercial, because we're going to go to full length and the breadth, of this thing here. But before we go to commercial, we want to hear from our women. I just want to know. I just want to know how you're going to do it, because the latest we heard from Boy Scouts, not to hate on Boy Scouts, but At least we heard on that, you know, you can't really count per se on manhood from that, you know. For whatever reasons, you know, we don't hate on it or whatever, but you can't count on it now. And as I said, church is a great place to turn, but, you know, our men aren't responding there either, you know.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
You see, so how will they, you know, Keenan, I mean, we got to ask the hard questions so we can have good, solid, practical results. And there's some women out there that have done it. It may be a small few that we know about, but there's women out there that have done it. They say, you know what, this child, as Keenan says, would be imbalanced, unbalanced, if I, as a parent, do not make sure that that child sees from somewhere some sense of male interaction and leadership. Keenan, you are in the trenches there in your community. You see the end results of an absence of male interaction, let alone leadership, all the time. And it's a question we have to ask.
And Coach, when we come back from break here, I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on that from my perspective, and then we can kind of go from there, Coach.
Man, this is the Keenan Lake Show, and I'm telling you, it's hot in the kitchen. It is hot in the kitchen. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. Thank you so very much for tuning in.
And you have just tuned in to the Keenan Lake Show. I'm your host, Keenan Lake. I am a published author, book My Daddy Taught Me That, a public speaker, and the president of a men's development youth program. The purpose of this show is to create awareness on topics that are dear to my heart, primarily absent fathers, male role models in the home, youth and young adults and children, families, and neglect and abuse. I not only want to shine a light on these topics and create awareness on these topics, I want to educate, inform, encourage, and motivate. So please join us on the Keenan Lake Show. For more information about the Keenan Lake Show, give us a call at 415-967-2346. And we thank you for listening to SIBN Radio.
Yeah, we're caught in the thicket, Keenan. We are caught in the thicket of a matrix of slave conditioning that yet we thought we were free from. And while we are not in chains physically and we are not in a plantation, yet in our minds we have yet to see personal freedom, community freedom, family freedom. Keenan?
You're absolutely right, Coach. And to elaborate a little bit and talk about what you just said before we went to break, Coach, you're 100% right. We talked about this, me and a couple of my coworkers, a few weeks back. My job, I'm a social worker, so my job is female-dominated. You know, it's a female-dominated profession. In fact, to be more elaborate, here in Asheville, North Carolina, there's about close to 300 social workers who work in my agency. Out of that 300, there's probably about 30 males. And I'm actually the only African-American male in Child Protective Services here in our agency in Buncombe County, which is in Asheville, North Carolina. So, Coach, you said it perfectly. Schools, the church, even when you look at how, like you said, these households are being ran by females in these days, a large percentage of them, primarily. And we're not talking about throughout, we're not talking about all families. We're talking about the single-parent homes. Mm-hmm. In single-parent homes, the majority is 70%. Actually, I think it's 80 now, Coach, if I'm not mistaken, 70 to 80%. And I think, I am right. 80% of all single-parent homes are being ran by females. Mm-hmm. So when you add that up, and then you think about it from this standpoint too, Coach, the females are interacting with their girlfriends. So, mm-hmm. The youth, primarily the males who are in these homes, are being introduced to nothing but females everywhere they turn.
Oh man, that's a good point.
Coach,
that's a good point.
Yeah, to combat that, Coach, you know, you made a statement before we went to break, and you said, how are we going to get the men motivated? Mm-hmm. Because I think that there are some women who have done everything they possibly could to get their children, male or female, exposed to positive males. Mm-hmm. I think just like there's some who have, when you're dealing with some who may be manipulative, and with the baby's father or the boyfriend or whatever, mm-hmm. and they may feel like they can totally raise their child without any kind of male influence. Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say this. I think, Coach, we have to look at it from a different standpoint. Mm-hmm. And say, and I'm not telling anybody to try to go out there and do what I did, because I was truly blessed to have some resources put in place, and to try to start an organization, which is a nonprofit mentoring, young male mentoring program. But what I can say is this: back in the day, Coach, I'm not sure if y'all did it like this in Ohio. I'm probably positive that you guys did, though. But back in the day, Coach, when I was raised, my grandmother, she had the mentality of, particularly if you were a child, and you were a child who was less fortunate or didn't have, then you were going to be taken care of, because she's going to go out and take care of you. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, my grandfather, who was in the home, he made it a way for the child to come into the home financially. So men need to start, even though you see a kid and you say, hey, that kid, he ain't gonna make it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you may have your hands full with your own kid, but you can take a little time out to if it's nothing but every time you see that kid, you encourage them, mm-hmm. or you give them something positive, or you take them under your wing. Mm-hmm. We have to get away from, well, it's not my kid, I'm not going to do anything about it, or mm-hmm. if it's not a black kid, I'm not going to do anything about it. It could be a white kid. It could be it's about being able to see our youth and see these children. Because, Coach, I'm going to tell you something else that we need to start talking about on the show that I've been seeing a lot over the last several months. We're having a lot of youth out there who are homeless. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by youth, Coach, is this: in the last 3 weeks, Coach, I've encountered 3 young women, ages 19, 20, and 21, who are homeless. Mm-hmm. 19, 20, and 21, and I've known these, and I see them, and I'm like, hey, I'm good, and what are you doing now? Well, I'm at the shelter, I'm standing down at the shelter, mm-hmm. and it's like, are you serious? Like, wow, like so, mm-hmm. Coach, the bottom line is this: pretty soon, if we don't start getting the handle on this and start reaching outside of our own, and this is the thing, get out of our own comfort zone, mm-hmm. and get out of our own way, and start trying to extend that helping hand, mm-hmm. it's going to present a problem for everybody.
Well, I'm glad you said that, but stop right there, because that's what you've been saying in some of your other shows, and you've brought evidence. If this was a court of law, we should have called it the Keenan Court. But, I mean, you've been bringing evidence every week, every show, to show the signs and the writing on the wall. We just talked about, I think, several shows back about the $5 billion that they wanted to cut from the EBT program, or the food stamp program. We talked about how getting a job, we briefly talked about how getting a job is not really giving you a leg up, but it's just keeping you in a standstill position, and you're asking yourself, what do I do now? You can't hardly get a leg up with the job because it don't pay enough, it has no benefits, and every time you want to take off to try to go to school and better yourself or go to church, you can't do that because the job requires that you be available as much as possible, yet they pay you as little as they can. I need some help. So, I mean, you've been bringing evidence on, and you've been building this case, as it were, and we'll continue to build it on the heels of, will we default as African American people? Let's just put it like that. Will we default on the payment that we owe our ancestors for the freedom they fought and died for? Will we default on our payment? And the interest payment is very high at this point, because we have borrowed a lot from our forefathers. We have borrowed relentlessly. And we are now at the threshold, Keenan, I think perhaps what you were saying, correct me if I'm wrong, at passing on a deficit that our children the children's children, who may not even have a fair chance at development because they are inundated with a plethora of social, communal, criminal problems that affect every region so drastically that you can't even go skateboarding without getting shot. You can't go to the park because funding have been closed and funding have been put elsewhere for high traffic, violent kids, so forth and so on. So you've been bringing that evidence every week to show, listen, folks, we're not trying to scare you. We're not trying to down you. We're not trying to indict you. But there's a payment come due that the ancestors require.
Yep.
It's a payment due. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Very well said, Coach. So, Coach, as we start to wrap this up, I want to tell all the listeners out there, I encourage all of you who are listening to the sounds of the Keenan Lake Show today to go to your computer and pull up the Willie Lynch letter and read it for yourself. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of information, and like Coach said earlier in the show today, you know, there may be other shows that we'll be bringing out bits and pieces of this letter, you know, to try to kind of tie it into where we are as a whole and where we are in society. Because once again, I want to make this clear. It says in this letter that if this letter is taught correctly and implemented correctly, that it will be able to control and manipulate and all other kind of stuff the so-called slaves for the next 300 to 400 years. Well, if you know, not trying to be funny and not trying to, but African Americans, we were slaves. Mm-hmm. We were born into this country for the most part as slaves, and so I look at this letter as it's primarily talking to us. Mm-hmm. So if it's primarily talking to us, what we have to do is find ways that we can kind of counteract it and do better. We don't have to be subjected just because there's a letter that was written 300-400 years ago. And don't get it wrong. When you put and you disturb and you mess with a person's mind, you can start controlling them, and not only that, but you have control of every other thing too. So, but there's ways that we can do better. And the ways that we can do better is not by getting out in the streets and fighting, or not by doing this, but by using our brains that God gave us to do better and start picking ourselves up.
And if you stuck in a pattern, get on your knees and pray for some help. I mean, sometimes you just stuck. Yep. You got to ask for help.
Yep. So I encourage our listeners to read that Willie Lynch letter for yourself to kind of understand and get some insight. The T.D. Jakes show that I was telling you guys about is called T.D. Jakes' Mind, Body, and Soul, and it actually airs again tonight at 11 o'clock. That's Eastern time. Mm-hmm. So if you have a chance to watch that, because the show that he talked about today talked about fatherhood and stuff like that, and it was a lot of great information. I encourage all of you guys to watch that. You know, just not trying to promote T.D. Jakes, but just thought the show was really good.
But you know, before we go to close, I want to encourage someone who's listening about a very important thing that, Keenan, you care about very much, and that's fatherhood. Let's talk about that real quickly. This word fatherhood, for those women that are out there listening, and men as well, look up the word fatherhood. It means one thing in the physical, but even the connotation of fatherhood, we're losing that. And that is when you, like we said earlier, when you turn to communities, where are the men? When you turn to the church, where are the men? When you turn to, you know, business, innovation, and so forth and so on, where are the men? So I want you guys to look up the word fatherhood, because there are some backdoor ways, and some of y'all done already did, about listening to the Keenan Lake Show. If you listen to folks, not that our fathers were perfect, they were far from it. Trust me when I tell you that. But if you open yourself to healing from what you didn't have, so that you can be shown what it is in your arsenal that you do have, you can reiterate that fatherhood spirit in your home from a spiritual perspective. So I want you guys to look that word up. Tell us what you think that word means. Motherhood, hey, they get the gold award, okay, for staying the task. But we don't want to kill our mothers early because the fathers are never there, or fatherhood spirit is never in our community. you see. So y'all look that word up. That's a very important word, and we'll talk more about that in the future. Keenan, tell them also about the website, some things that you're doing there where they can contribute, purchase. The holidays are approaching in some cases here, and for other places that are listening internationally, they may want to support the Keenan Lake Show and the Keenan Lake Men's Program.
All right, Coach. Well, listen, folks, as always, you can always follow me on Twitter at the KL Show, Facebook, Keenan Lake, also Facebook, Keenan Lake on SIBN Radio, and then also on Facebook, Keenan Lake, it's called My Daddy Taught Me That. That's the Facebook page for that. So those are 3 Facebooks and a Twitter. If you're not on Facebook, you're not on Twitter, please go to the website, www.mydaddytaughtmethat.com. On the website, there's information about the book. There's tons of information about my program, which is the Men's Development Program. You'll be able to listen to the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio on the website as well. But there's actually a donate button on the website as well. So with the nonprofit organization, I've been funding my nonprofit out of pocket, trying to get grants and stuff like that. But anytime you get grant funding and you're going, you may get it, you may not. So donation is always needed. Please hit that donate button and find ways to donate. Also, if you go on the website, there's a shop section. Now, with the shop section, you have to contact me because I don't have it set up yet to where you can directly purchase off of it. But there are items on the website that you can purchase right now. It's just shirts and a wristband. In the next 3 weeks, there'll be hats and toboggans, and then before the end of the year's out, there'll be sweatsuits as well. So we're trying to open up the little market, so to speak, to where you can start purchasing My Daddy Taught Me That paraphernalia and representing the cause, because we want this world to be strong, we want this nation to be strong. But most importantly, we just want to be able to help our youth and our families out there. That's what this show's about, and that's what the organization and the movement's about.
Man, Keenan, I mean, your show may be a surrogate daddy for some folk because they may not be able to get this information that you're sharing anywhere else at this time, but because you're sharing it, now their eyes are open and they'll look other places, not only to your website, but also to other things that perhaps have been creeping up that they should take a look at so that they can ensure that they themselves have that daddy principle. We need to do that one day, a show on that, the daddy principle. What does it really mean, and is it possible to have that principle active in your life if a father or male father was not present? But man, Keenan, don't forget the phone number. Keenan, give them the phone number one more time if they have any questions, consultations, or want to know how to support the programs even in depth. Give them the phone number one more time.
Yeah, that phone number is area code 828-582-2261.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Keenan, stand by. Thank you guys for listening to, it's almost like a special edition. It kind of felt that way today, the Willie Lynch letter from past to present. We trust that you are encouraged, empowered, as you continue to listen to the KL Show right here on SIBN Radio. Don't forget to follow Keenan right there on Twitter, the KL Show on Twitter and Facebook, the Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio, and his personal page, Keenan Lake. This is a great show to download and share with your friends. Until next time, whatever you do, take care of yourself.
Hell or snow, for sure. Make a pretty girl feel like a Smurf hard. The tongue's never been soft like a nerf. I said give a dream, put you in a mini skirt, now you selling for the team. Manipulate your mind till your mind is mine. I'm light years ahead of you, baby girl. You way behind, and I'ma have my way. You'll stay behind, but if you let me manage you, then I'ma make you shine. Nothing but lies, whatever it take, even though we're moving the lies. It's how a pimp thing, no love, working with a killer instinct. All for the money, I push you over the brain, but now that ain't the way to go. You better off letting Jesus save your soul. Stuff starting to take its toll. Christ in your face, ready to make you whole. Cause ain't no game good enough. Nah, you ain't hood enough to get over on guard. Nobody gangster enough, nobody thug enough. Let me tell you something, you ain't that hard.
I know that you's a pimp and wanna pimp hard, but in your pimping you can't never pimp God. I know that you's a pimp and wanna pimp hard, but in your pimping you can't never pimp God. I know that you's a pimp and wanna pimp hard, but in your pimping you can't never pimp God. I know that you's a pimp and wanna pimp hard, but in your pimping you can't never pimp God.
Thank you for joining us today for the Keenan Lake Show. We know you will be empowered as you consider the content shared by Mr. Keenan Lake, co-host Marcus Select, and our guests. For more information about Mr. Keenan Lake, please visit www.mydaddytaughtmethat, and feel free to email us at lake@mydaddytaughtmethat.com. Books can be ordered from Mr. Lake by calling 828-582-2261. Until next time, you've been listening to The Keenan Lake Show on SIBN Radio.